So we are now at lesson 17 of Job, and this is actually, I can say this with confidence, this is our second to last lesson in Job. And I am really looking forward to what's coming next, depending on how things go with the coronavirus and the spread of it, and how soon it dissipates and people are back into church, and how soon they lift the assembly restrictions and all those things. That will probably depend on when I start the new series. I'm not going to start a new Bible study series without our typical group of regular people here. But I am looking forward to what's coming next as soon as it's time to start that. If there is a period of time in between where I'll fill in the blank with something else, which will be just follow the leading of the Lord as far as what He wants. But we still have today and Lord willing next week for Job and miscellaneous lessons. And this is one of my favorite lessons about Job, and that is lessons about science. Lessons about science. Of all the books of the Bible, Job has a number of references to scientific things that prove. But number one, it shows the inerrancy, it shows the accuracy, the scientific accuracy of God's Word. That some of these things that people had no idea about in say what we would consider the science field, things that got discovered much later, these are described in the Bible. And remember that Job is one of the earliest books of the Bible, so all the way back near the beginning of at whatever point it was that Job lived, between Noah and Moses, somewhere in there. It's really amazing just how accurate the Bible is. And so we're going to look at lessons about science today. So we don't view the Bible as a scientific manual, but it is scientifically accurate. So it'd be a mistake to look at the Bible and say, well, this is my science book. I'm not going to use any other science book. This is my science book. It's not a science book, but everywhere that the Bible talks about science, it is correct. It's been shown to be correct, and scientifically proven to be correct. Same thing, the Bible is not a history book. In other words, you can read a lot of the Bible, you can learn a lot of history from the Bible, but it's not a complete view of history. There's a lot of things that actually having other history books helps to complement the Bible, as long as they're not in conflict with the Bible, but complement the Bible and help us to even increase our understanding. For example, just when Josiah and I were going through his history curriculum, there's a lot of things you can learn about the ancient civilizations that the Bible doesn't describe what the ancient civilizations are like, but if you put two and two together you learn about the civilizations and then you see the civilization referenced in the Bible, you can use that to increase your Bible knowledge, and it kind of helps complete the picture. So the Bible is not a history book, but wherever the Bible talks about history, it is accurate, and it's been continually shown to be accurate as there's been more archaeological finds and things that are done. It is shown to be accurate. So about science and history, those types of things, we don't view the Bible as a science book or a history book, but it does contain scientific facts and historical facts, and it is accurate. The late scientist Henry Morris observed, these references are modern in perspective, with never a hint of the mythical exaggerations and errors characteristic of other ancient writings. Perhaps of even greater significance is the fact that in a 4,000-year-old book filled with numerous references to natural phenomena, there are no scientific mistakes or fallacies. And that is remarkable. That's amazing. Just in that many of the even modern day science books from the last 200 years have been proven unreliable, and there's always, science is changing, the facts are always changing based on new research and new discoveries. And he says, David Cloud, not Henry Morris, but David Cloud, who wrote this study book, says, "My wife is a nurse, and we once found a Merck manual dating to the late 1800s, and it was so wrong-headed that it was literally like reading a joke book. For example, opiates were prescribed for practically every other sickness that was listed. I mean, basically back at that time, it's like, all right, here's an opioid, you got a little, maybe, I don't know what specific ones, but, you got a stuffy nose here, take an opioid, I don't know. But that is true. They used to prescribe those things much more liberally. And he says, the title of the book should have been, "We don't know much about how to cure you, but we can make you feel great and get you addicted to narcotics for the rest of your life." In 1692, British astronomer or astrologer, he says here, Edmund Halley, suggested that the Earth contains 3 smaller planets placed inside of each other and spinning at different rates, and that is the cause of earthquakes. So, very interesting thought there, which is not true. But so let's get into these scientific facts that are in Job. Let's go to Job 26. Job 26. Job 26. And I love the weather. I love weather facts. Love learning about the weather. It's very fascinating. There was a book that I had borrowed from the library at one point that's, what's it called? Encyclopedia of, no, maybe not encyclopedia, but anyway, it's a nice, thick, detailed book about weather, and it also includes a section on climate change. But it's a very good illustrated, it's basic. There's a lot of basic facts, but there's a lot of in-depth facts as well. And I barely got through it. I'm going to have to borrow it again sometime once the library's back open. It's just, for me, it's a very interesting subject. I know not everybody might like the particulars of the weather, but it is. And so getting into Job here, this is very exciting to see just how accurate the Bible is, and that science has proven the Bible to be correct, or has reinforced the Bible's accuracy. And so in Job 26 and verse 7, we see that the earth is hung upon nothing. It says, "He stretcheth out the north over the empty place, and hangeth the earth upon nothing." Now, if we were to have if we had a balloon here, and I just tried to put it up here and let it go, what would happen? It would fall, unless it had helium in it, of course, but it would not be suspended. Even if it had helium, it would keep going up and up until it hits a solid object to keep in place. But if I just had a balloon filled with regular air, it would fall to the ground. You can't suspend a balloon hanging on nothing. We'd have to tie a string tie a string to the ceiling, attach it to the balloon, and then you could have it hanging from the ceiling. But when God formed the earth, when He created the earth, it says He hangeth the earth upon nothing. And now, based on what we know from science, I mean, they didn't have satellites back then. They didn't have space vehicles, spacecraft to go way out there. They didn't have the International Space Station. I mean, just from the International Space Station, even though that's not high in relation to how high other spacecraft would go, you could still see, I mean, it goes around the earth all the time. It's always going around the earth. And so they, or I should say, I don't know how fast the space station is moving compared to the rotation of the earth. So the earth is rotating and it's moving in relation to the earth in some way, shape, or form. But even from the space station, you can see, wait a minute, I don't see anything attached to the earth. How is the earth held into place? Well, it's because God made it that way, and I'm sure there may be some scratching the surface of scientific facts that people can look to of how that happens. Certainly, maybe there's an aspect of gravity, but even with gravity, maybe the pull of the sun and all those. There's very technical things, but even with that, how does that work? How is that even possible? I mean, a lot of people don't even understand gravity. How are we firmly planted to the Earth's surface? Try to explain it. There's some people who can't understand it, so they just say, well, gravity doesn't exist. Now, how we're here and not floating in the air if gravity doesn't exist, I don't know. But I'm not sure what their answer is. But there are some people, it's just, well, if I can't understand it, I'm just going to come up with something else. We just have to recognize there are certain things we don't understand. We may not understand exactly how the earth hangs upon nothing, but the Bible says it. We see it scientifically that it is hung upon nothing. The earth, there are many commonly believed myths about the earth riding on the back of Atlas or a turtle or an elephant, different things that people have thought over the years, but we do see that the earth hangs on nothing. Turn to Job 28 and verse 25. Job 28 and verse 25. Number 2, the air has weight, and the atmosphere and hydrosphere are in balance. The air has weight, and the atmosphere and hydrosphere are in balance. And Job 28 and verse 25, it says, to make the weight for the winds, and he weigheth the waters by measure. So there you see about the weight for the winds, air having weight, but then he weigheth the waters by measure. And so there is, let me just read this. It was not until the 17th century that Galileo discovered that air or atmosphere has weight, and the modern science of aerodynamics is based on this fact. Further, the weight of air is an important element in the Earth's weather. Henry Morris says, the study of air flows and their relation to the weight of the air has been developed in the science of aerodynamics, eventually becoming the basis of all modern aerospace developments. The weight of the winds controls the worldwide air mass movements that transport the waters evaporated from the oceans inland over the continents. And so there's certain air, I believe, I'm probably gonna be scientifically wrong here, but so I'm going to be as broad, general as possible since I don't have the specifics in front of me. But there's certain air that rises. I believe it's cooler air that rises, and I think warmer air no? Is it the other way around? Cooler air is heavier, warm air rises. Well, that's, of course, heat rises. What am I thinking of? So you have the warm air rising, you have cooler air that comes down, and then when you have the clash of the two, it creates certain weather. It can create precipitation and different types. And so, the air mass movements have to do with wherever there's a warm air mass compared to a cooled air mass, one moving higher and one moving lower, and so there's all kinds of things that take place that affect that, the air mass movements and the waters, and also then the movement of water vapor. So just think about the hydrosphere, the Earth's water cycle. All of that thing stays completely in balance. So that, I mean, if you had one being out of balance from another, then you would see the even greater effects of that in the weather and in precipitation. And then, of course, when it comes to what places get rain and don't get rain, there's also then the factor of topography. There's mountain ranges, and so that affects the air masses. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But it's just amazing how that all works. The air has weight, and the atmosphere and hydrosphere are in balance. And then, of course, then there's the barometric pressure. There's high pressure, there's low pressure. And so it's when we have a day like today, then when we have a precipitation event like last night and into today, that's an area of low pressure that's moving. But then there's high pressure that's right near it, and you have the forming of precipitation. So all kinds of things. But the air having weight is something that was not known at that time. And then the aspect of the atmosphere and hydrosphere. Number 3, cloud formation and rain making are described. Look at there, and also in Job 28, verse 26. When he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder. When he made a decree for the rain and the way for the lightning of the thunder. And then go to Job 36. In verses 27 and 28, for he maketh small the drops of water, they pour down rain according to the vapor thereof, which the clouds do drop and distill upon man abundantly. So and actually if I read verse 29, it says, also can any understand the spreadings of the clouds or the noise of his tabernacle? And so can anybody understand that? How does that work? I mean, you can know the facts as much as can be known, but at the same time, the fact that it happens is amazing. Yeah. Just the fact that it happens. So he maketh small the drops of water. So what happens? The the way rain is made, water vapor, if the vapor is lighter than the air, the vapor just goes up and is not heavy enough to fall, gathers together into clouds. But then once you have vapor that goes together, gets attached to particles, and there's more water vapor that attaches to that, it creates droplets. And then once the droplets get heavy enough, they come down by way of rain, or in the case of colder weather, snow and everything in between. We now know, Henry Morris, I believe, Henry Morris says, we now know that the global weights of air and water... Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, this is talking about the atmosphere and hydrosphere. Let me go back to that. We now know that the global weights of air and water must be in critical relationship to each other and to the earth as a whole to maintain life on Earth. Planet Earth is uniquely designed for life, and its atmosphere and hydrosphere are the most important components of that design. If the weights of either air or water were much different than they are, life as we know it could not survive. And someone, forget if it was Joanna or Eliana, someone asked me the other night, I think it was Wednesday, it must have been Eliana. Were you the one asking me about Venus? Did you ask about Venus? I can't remember now. Someone in the last week was asking me about Venus and what Venus is like, and talking about visiting Venus, and I said, well, you couldn't even visit Venus. It's a lot of poisonous gases. Does that sound familiar? That might have been last Sunday.
Yeah, it was me.
It was you. I think it was you. Yeah, it was last Sunday night, actually. And, said Venus is not hospitable to life. None of the other planets are hospitable to life, but Venus has a bunch of poisonous gases. It's very hot. But Earth is not only is the balance between air and water what it needs to be to sustain life, it's also, Earth is just the right distance from the sun to sustain life. If it were just a little bit closer, it'd be too hot. If it were just a little bit farther away, it'd be too cold and would not be hospitable to life. And so now, as I missed that in the previous point, but going back to the process of cloud formation and rainmaking, the book of Job describes how that water can be transported in the air even though it weighs more than air. It describes how the clouds can stay aloft and how water can be bound up in a cloud and not rent, and how the clouds can be balanced in the sky. And the water is converted by solar energy, and this is Henry Morris, water is converted by solar energy into the vapor state. Since water vapor is lighter than air, the winds can first elevate, then transport the water from the oceans to the land where it is needed. There, under the right conditions, the vapor can condense around dust particles, salt particles, or other nuclei of condensation. When this happens, clouds are formed. Water vapor is invisible, whereas clouds are aggregations of liquid water droplets. The water droplets are indeed very small, and their weight is sustained by the drag force of the uprushing winds as the air is pushed skyward due to the temperature decrease with elevation. The book of Job further describes how the clouds are finally rent so that rain comes forth. When it says, by watering, he wearieth the thick cloud in Job 37:11. That is, the water droplets coalesce to form larger and larger drops, which finally become so large that their weight is greater than the drag forces of the uprushing atmospheric turbulence, causing them to fall to the ground as rain or snow. And then also in Job, actually we already read this verse, but he made a decree for the rain and a way for the lightning of the thunder. And then Job 38:25 and 26 talks about a way for the lightning of the thunder to cause it to rain on the earth. So let's look at that. Job 38 and verse 25. It says, who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man. So and this is God talking here, and I like what he says at the beginning of the verse, who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters. God says, I've made a place for all the waters to go. Even when they overflow where they are, they're going to find somewhere else to go. And then he talks about the lightning having a part of this. These violent electrical currents in some complex energy exchange not yet fully understood cause the small water droplets to bind together with others to form larger drops. Finally, this remarkable series of events delivers the rain to the thirsty ground. And so it's no accident that you might, as if there's a thunderstorm coming, there's a flash of lightning, the clap of thunder, and then all of a sudden it starts raining right after that. You ever see that happen? Kaboom! And then down comes the rain. There's some scientific way that those electrical currents and what takes place there in the clouds, it triggers that rain being ready to fall. Now, whatever it may have to do with it pushes water droplets together so they get heavier and then they fall because of what is taking place there. The rotation of the earth related to the sun is described in, so we have number 4 here. Rotation of the earth in relation to related to the sun is described, Job 38 and verses 12 through 14. It says, "Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment." Now, I saw some absurd thing that this verse, this turned as clay to the seal, somehow proves that there's a flat earth, which is not what it's talking about here. That's just absurdity. But by the way, from the space station, it's very obvious the earth is not flat. Okay, and I don't think those are computer-generated images and the space station is fake and it's all a lie and it's all a hoax and all that kind of stuff. That's just not the case. As a matter of fact, if you look at the live feed from the space station, it's pretty fascinating. You just look in awe. Wow, look at the vast earth. And by the way, the earth does have a fairly gentle curve. If you look at those pictures from the space station, it's not this. It is a very gentle curve where it almost does look kind of flat, but it is a curve. But the earth is so big that even with a gentle curve, you do eventually end up with a globe, with a sphere. So the rotation of the earth, Henry Morris says, Job suggests not only that the earth was suspended in space, but also that it rotates about its north projecting axis. Though figurative language, this reflects a true physical process. God is pictured as taking hold of the two ends of the earth's axis and turning it as if it were a clay cylinder receiving an impression from a seal. Because they look at, the people that use that verse for the flat earth, they just look at it as like this flat seal. And so it's turned as clay to the seal, so you have this seal stamping the flat earth. So that's not what that means. God is pictured as taking hold of the two ends of the earth's axis and turning it as if it were a clay cylinder receiving an impression from a seal. The seal toward which the earth is turned, however, is not a metallic pattern. Rather, it is the dayspring, evidently the sun fixed in its place. The welcome light of the morning dispels the formlessness of the earth's surface when shrouded in darkness and unveils the beauties of the earth's structure and verdure. Number 5, the springs of the sea are described, Job 38:16. And notice a pattern here. Most of these verses are from Job 38. God is talking here. God is talking. So it wasn't Job that was revealing all of this, although some of the other portions of things we've looked at were from other parts of Job. But in this particular case, the rest of these verses we're going to look at, those are in Job 38. This is God talking. This is God revealing His creation. And these things were not scientifically known by man until much, much later. The springs of the sea, Job 38:16 says, "Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea, or hast thou walked in search of the depth?" And we do know it is. We do know there's water underneath the surface of the earth. There's springs that come out of the sea. There are aquifers even under the dry ground, and then also during the flood of Noah's day, the Bible says the fountains of the great deep were opened up. And so it meant indicating that there was a bunch of water stored up under the earth's surface, and God opened that up, and then Then later on, when the rain stopped, God stopped the clouds. He also stopped the fountains of the great deep. Doesn't mean they were empty. It just means that God stopped them. And there was still more water underneath, and as we see today, and certainly in some way there can be water that maybe finds its way back down, replenishes the water level under the surface. The man had no way to know about the freshwater springs on the ocean floor by first-hand observation until modern times. Modern science has discovered that there are thousands of underwater springs that add millions of metric tons of water into the oceans each year. The knowledge of science recorded in the ancient book of Job is far, far beyond its time. And then number 6, light moves and darkness stays in place. Light moves and darkness stays in place. Job 38 and verse 19. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? Now the two key words that are different there is way and place. Darkness has a place. It's stationary. Light moves. Light moves. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And so light has a way. It has a path. It has a road it goes on. It has a way that it travels. Then verse 24, in chapter 38. By what way is the light parted which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? So number one, so we have two things in this verse. The first one is in number 7, light can be separated. So, and that has been shown. You have the prism, the different colors that come out of light. And so we talk about light being parted. But then the second part, which leads us to number 8, is that light creates wind. Light creates wind. It says, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth. The way that light creates wind is that when the sunlight heats up the surface of the earth, that air then begins to move. And then when you have the cold air and you have the warm air, it creates even greater movement, and you have the weather patterns. It was only in recent times that modern weather science has discovered that wind is created as the sun heats up the surface of the earth, causing the hot air to rise and cooler air to fall, creating weather systems. And once again, how does that happen? We just know it happens. I mean, try explaining that. I mean, you can explain it. I mean, you know the facts. We know the facts. But just the fact that it happens is pretty amazing to me. Someone put all this in place. Someone created the universe. Someone created the earth, that where all of that was built in, that could take place. And that is amazing. And then number 9, the hydrological cycle is described. Job 38, starting in verse 25. Who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of the waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man, to satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth? Hath the rain a father, or who hath begotten the drops of dew, out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of heaven, who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. And so there's the circulation of the atmosphere, there's evaporation, condensation, precipitation, there's the runoff, and all of those things were not discovered as far as the process of evaporation and condensation were not discovered until the 17th century, and then still not well understood until the 20th century. But God is describing those things here in His speech to Job.
And as we learn in verse 27, every farmer knows where it says to satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth. If you've got dry, hard-packed ground, all it takes is just a little bit of dead vegetation, some rain to make the penetration, and then it loosens the ground, seeds germinate, and they just spring forth new life.
Sure.
So it's that cycle of all of those macroorganisms and all of those things that are in the ground that cause everything to do its job, and then the rain is the catalyst that brings it all together and makes it work.
Sure.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that's the same as what you'd see in say on a documentary about deserts and You have the dry season where it's just looks like nothing's going to grow here. What happens when there's rain from the mountains and the water rushes down and just things spring up and grow up, and it provides some much needed sustenance for the animal life around there in that desert area. So just amazing, the cycles of water and that God put into place. And what he's getting across to Job here, God is once again, he's emphasizing his role as the creator, who he is. In other words, Job, you aren't this. Have you done this? Can you understand this? Can you know this? But in other words, God knows all of that because God has done these things. And so he's trying to get Job's eyes off of himself, Job's eyes off of his earthly perspective, and say, you need to get a bigger perspective. You need to look to me. I'm the one who's done all of this. You need to look to me. Job hadn't cursed God. He hadn't lost his faith in God, but yet his perspective still needed some adjusting. And one of the best ways to adjust a perspective is just get a greater perspective of God being the Almighty Creator. And that's why the subject of creation is so important. It's one of the reasons. But it's viewing God as the Creator puts Him in His rightful place. It elevates God to His rightful place. And when people try to compromise with that and say, well, I think, God did create everything, but He did it through the process of evolution. He might have done it over millions of years and all these things. You're robbing God of His rightful place as the Creator and robbing Him of glory to somehow strip away what He has done. That somehow He didn't have the ability to just speak and things came into existence. For Him just to do things in 6 literal days. That's how powerful, that's how big of a God that we have. And so that's why I love these lessons about science, because it does exalt God as the Creator. And I encourage you, get that. I forget what the name of the book is now, but it's a vast. If you're interested in science, interested in the weather, get that encyclopedia of weather and climate from the library. It's a good one.